Hi everyone, happy Monday. I've got a great little story today. It's called Searching for Yes in the Land of No by B.J. Gallagher. And it says millions of people say that they'd like to write a book someday. You know, maybe a novel, their life story, a children's book, a murder mystery, or perhaps a self-help book. Of these millions, perhaps a million of them actually do write a story in a given year. Of this million, approximately 300,000 of them get published. And each of these books have less than 1% chance of being stocked in an average bookstore. The average book sells about 500 copies. In other words, once you write a book, getting it published, it's a long shot. And if you get it published, making it successful is even a bigger long shot. Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen learned this the hard way. They spent 3 years gathering stories and editing them for a collection they called Happy Little Stories. By the time they were finished, they were $140,000 in debt. Then they found a literary agent who agreed to represent them, and he set about sending the manuscripts to publishers he thought may be interested. But the response was unanimous. No. One publisher said nobody buys anthologies anymore. Another said it's not topical enough. Yet another said we just don't get it. And finally, the worst no of all, their literary agent dropped them. After pitching the book to dozens of publishers, he came up empty-handed. I can't sell this book, he told them. Nobody buys short stories anymore. That could have been the end of the story for Canfield and Hansen. Undoubtedly, most authors would have given up by now, but not these two. Instead, they decided to try to sell the book themselves. So they made 200 copies of their manuscript, stuffed them into their backpacks, and headed to the annual American Booksellers Association convention, now called the Book Expo America. They roamed the aisles of the huge convention center, buttonholing every editor and publisher they could find. They handed out dozens of copies of their manuscripts, but still, no takers. Finally, after 2 days of nonstop hunting and schmoozing, they met Peter Vesco, owner of a small publishing house in Deerfield Beach, Florida, called Health Communications, Inc., HCI. This publisher was in the business of doing primarily recovery books, and they had fallen on hard times as the recovery movement peaked and waned. On the verge of bankruptcy themselves, Vesco had put his company on the market to sell it. In the meantime, he was still desperately trying to save it by expanding into a broader category of spiritual books. Vesco agreed to take a chance on this collection of happy stories. After all, he figured, I don't have anything to lose. After much discussion, they changed the name of the book to Chicken Soup for the Soul, and in 1993, HCI published it. Then the hard work for authors began in earnest. As Hansen says today, making your book successful is 5% about writing a good book and 95% in marketing. He knows what you're talking about. He and Canfield lived it. For the first year after the book was published, both men lived, ate, and slept their book, mortgaging their homes to the hilt, working nonstop day and night to make their baby successful. They went to their hometown publisher, the Los Angeles Times, and walked through the newsroom one afternoon handing out copies of the Chicken Soup for the Soul to every single reporter and editor, hoping that someone would write about their book. Yet no one did. They spread the word, sending out press releases, doing book signings, promoting their book during the seminars and workshops, and hiring publicists and others to make their book successful. Canfield and Hansen did everything they could to take their baby to the top. And in 14 months, they made it. They arrived, the nirvana of books and authors, the #1 spot on the New York Times bestseller, and remained there for 2 years. The authors were winners, and so was their publisher. Together, they accomplished the impossible. Vesco saved his publishing company from bankruptcy, and the authors made their dream come true. As of December 2010, there were over 200 titles in the Chicken Soup series of books, with over 112 million copies in print in 40 languages. Canfield and Hansen are living proof of the power in asking for what you want, seeking out help for others, and refusing to take no for an answer. They knew all they needed was one yes to get that book published. So they just kept going through the no's until they found it. Henry Ford said it best: whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Great thing to think about this Monday. Happy Monday.